Hello everyone, I am Scutlist, and I've now completed a thorough playthrough of Dynasty Warriors Origins. All three routes, with both their normal and hypothetical endings. With a little over 100 hours of gameplay under my belt, I've developed a good grasp of what the game is doing right, and what it's doing wrong. Before I start, let me be clear that I will be spoiling lots of the game's story, so please click away if you'd rather experience it for yourself first. Without further waiting, let's begin. Dynasty Warriors Origins is a new entry in the Dynasty Warriors franchise, the franchise's first new console entry in close to 3 years since Dynasty Warriors 9 Empires, returning us to ancient China once again to rampage across battlefields, defeating thousands of enemies per battle. The story of Dynasty Warriors Origins is a familiar one if you played this franchise before. The franchise is based on a Chinese novel called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which was itself based on the historical Three Kingdoms period. As such, once you played one Dynasty Warriors game, you'll know the basic plot of all others, as every new game in the franchise is effectively a reboot of the same story. Different games may go into more or less detail about certain plot points, and may change the characterization of certain characters, but the general story is mostly the same. With Origins, we have perhaps the most detail in the story of the time period we've ever had. Though as a trade-off, we also have the earliest endpoint for the story ever, with the plot only going up to the Battle of Kirby. Because of this early ending point, characters who are only introduced after Kirby, such as Jiang Wei or Ding Fong, are nowhere to be seen in this game. This time around, the story is told through the eyes of a new protagonist of Koei Tecmo's invention, an amnesiac man wandering China who, by default, is named Wanderer, and as such that will be what I refer to him as throughout this review. But you can name him anything you wish, provided it fits within a rather generous 16 space limits. As you would expect, because you can name him whatever you please, his name will always be conveniently left out of spoken dialogue.
This is just an idle thought. A hypothetical, if you will.
Accompanying him is a Dr. Yuan Hua, who is treating the Wanderer's amnesia. The story is told through a prologue and 5 chapters that cover the Yellow Turban Rebellion all the way to the Battle of Kirby. The Wanderer will go from a simple swordsman traveling the land to an officer of whatever faction you side with. Yuan Hua, for his part, is really only relevant for the story of uncovering the Wanderer's past. He is acknowledged in the story of whichever faction you side with. It's not as though he doesn't exist, but he isn't particularly important in the story of your faction. The Wanderer isn't a completely blank slate and does have some backstory to him. Throughout the early story, he's visited by a woman wearing similar garb to his own, named Juha, as well as a young boy named Bai Luan. It's explained that the Wanderer was taken in by the Guardians of Peace, an organization that's maintained tranquility from the shadows since the founding of the Han Dynasty, until they decided to give refuge to a child who was the son of rebels, provoking the Han officials to surround the village and burn it down. For the early parts of the story, the Wanderer is believed to be the only survivor. Juha, who frequently appears before him, is eventually revealed to be a product of the Wanderer's guilt, when in reality she passed away with the rest of the village. Her final words to the Wanderer, to seek his own path, are his subconscious motivation until he regains his memory. That roughly sums up his backstory. What is the Wanderer like as an actual character? Well, the Wanderer is a classic silent protagonist. He does speak a little in the middle of battles, but in terms of story scenes, he has no dialogue other than a few speech options you can select. In terms of personality, other characters describe him as being very calm, and that's pretty much the only personality trait he's ever given. His dialogue options are also effectively irrelevant. Which dialogue option you choose will change another character's next line, but for the overall story they change nothing. The only technically important dialogue option is agreeing to join a faction, or saying you need more time to think about it. He also doesn't really bring much to the story of whichever faction you side with. Other than being an extra strong and unflinchingly loyal officer, he only has a few small moments of being uniquely relevant in your chosen faction's story. The factions you don't side with still have their storylines play out the same even without his help. While his default name in the game is Wanderer, he has another name, Ziluan. South Sound nicknames him this early on in the game. but in flashbacks it's shown to actually be his proper name. As such, when characters address the Wanderer not with whatever name you gave him, but instead with his correct name, it will be properly voice acted. Because of the early stopping point in the story, Origins goes into far more detail about certain plot points, particularly early plot points. The Yellow Turban Rebellion is traditionally just the tutorial battle in this franchise, only being made longer in games which gives the faction's leader, Zhang Jiao, his own story mode. In Origins, the entire Chapter 1 of the game, a solid 6 battles in length, is entirely dedicated to the fight against the Yellow Turbans. In doing this, we get to more properly contextualize the greed and exploitation that led to the formation of the Yellow Turbans.
This merchant has confessed everything. You had him purchase goods from corrupt scholars and sell them for you in the city. In exchange, he offered you bribes and business favors.
Scoundrels! Don't you know how hungry we are? Silence!
Stay back!
They even get one battle where they're the heroes, being the force that rescues you in the tutorial battle, only to swiftly lose their moral compass, becoming the ones pillaging the common folk.
I thought you were on our side!
We are, as long as you pay us!
This change in them does unfortunately happen very swiftly. In context of the story, there's a 2-month time skip between the prologue battle they rescue you in and Chapter 1 where they're the main villains. But from the perspective of the audience, it's a bit of a whiplash. Chapter 2 focuses on the further rebellions and unrest that led to the coalition against Dong Zhuo. Unfortunately, it comes with the baggage of feeling padded out. The first 4 battles in Chapter 2 are against 4 different disconnected rebellions against the Han, which feels like filler after a while. Chapters in this game are typically 6 battles in length. Chapter 2 is made into 9 battles to compensate for this. Still, even after the story starts to amp up as Dong Zhuo takes control of the government and becomes a despot, I'm left feeling like the first battles of Chapter 2 didn't need to go on as much as they did. Have us mandatorily do 1 or 2 to set the scene of how many rebellions are sprouting up, and how little faith people have in the Han court anymore, and omit the rest of the battles to make the story flow a bit more effectively. In Chapter 3, the time has come to choose your faction. Choose whomever you feel is the hero who can end the strife of the current era. During this chapter, you can freely aid any of the groups of characters that will go on to form the 3 kingdoms: Cao Cao's forces, Liu Bei's forces, and Sun Ce's forces. At first. You can try to work with all 3 factions, but there will come a point where you must choose one faction over the other as they're on opposite sides of a certain battle, permanently alienating the group you didn't side with and preventing you from working with them for the rest of the game. Put simply, if you're trying to be friendly with both Cao Cao and Liu Bei, you'll eventually have to side with one over the other in the Battle of Shu Province. Likewise, during the Battle of Xiao Pei, you must decide if you want to support Liu Bei or Sun Ce. If you want to be in Liu Bei's good graces, you must side against both Cao Cao and Sun Ce at different points. Conversely, you can actually be friendly with Cao Cao and Sun Ce for all of Chapter 3, as these 2 groups aren't hostile with each other until Chirbi. However, I don't recommend doing that due to the amount of battles you'd be doing. I'd instead opt to just focus on supporting one faction and only one faction. Try to be buddy-buddy with all 3 groups as much as you can, and you can turn Chapter 3 into a breathtakingly long 14 battles. Once you've completed all of one force's battles in Chapter 3, you'll get approached with an offer to formally become an officer of that faction. Accept, and Chapter 3 ends, and you're locked into sticking with that faction for the final 2 chapters of the game. Upon joining a faction, the Wanderer is given a new outfit to reflect that he is now an officer. If this outfit is not your cup of tea, you have the option to go back to his original outfit. I actually have a bit of a problem with his officer outfit, not because of the exact design of the outfit, but because of the coloring. The officer outfit still retains the black color scheme of his first outfit, which makes him awkwardly stick out when he's standing with his allies. Imagine if we got a blue version of this outfit when siding with Cao Cao, a green version of this outfit when siding with Liu Bei, and a red version of this outfit when siding with Sun Ce. With chapters 4 and 5, the story progression should be all old news to anyone familiar with the storyline of the Dynasty Warriors games, covering battles such as Guandu or Changban, eventually culminating with the Battle of Chirbi. With one notable twist. It turns out the Wanderer is not the only survivor of the Guardians of Peace. The child from the flashbacks, Bai Luan, returns, now grown up, with seething hatred for the Han. No matter what faction you choose, he's incensed by your pick of a lord to follow. If you sided with Cao Cao, he regards Cao Cao as a heartless tyrant, as well as loyal to the Han court, the same Han that torched the village. If you sided with Sun Ce, he regards the Sun clan as conquerors who control their lands with oppression. If you sided with Liu Bei, he's actually initially positive about Liu Bei, albeit only on the basis that he opposes Cao Cao. But upon seeing how many people, including the common peasants, are motivated to take up weapons on his behalf, he begins to ponder if Liu Bei is more of a threat to peace than Cao Cao is. Regardless, the Wanderer stops his attempts on the life of the faction leader, for both Cao Cao and Liu Bei. If you side with the Sun clan, he actually does successfully kill Sun Ce, being the doer of the deed in Origins, instead of Gan Ji as it normally is. If you sided with the Sun, it's the next leader, Sun Quan, that you successfully protect from Bai Luan. After a few fights, Bai Luan is convinced to relent and accept your choice for the one who will end the strife, but with a warning that he'll make another attempt on their life if they stray from their path. While the Wanderer's primary character trait is calmness, Bai Luan's primary trait is that he's very, very angry. The writers may have been going for a yin-yang theme with these two opposing traits, but even so, I found Bai Luan a very forgettable part of the story. He returns fairly abruptly in late Chapter 4, and his little story concludes in early Chapter 5. The story ends, as I already mentioned, at the Battle of Chirbi. If you sided with Liu Bei or the Sun clan, you defeat Cao Cao's fleet with a fire attack on the water, though Cao Cao escapes. Conversely, if you sided with Cao Cao, you flee the Coalition's pursuit, and even have a final duel with Guan Yu to protect Cao Cao at the very end. Unless you fulfilled the requirements to unlock the hypothetical endings for each faction. In which case, if you're with the Sun, Bai Luan will take Sun Ce and Sun Jian with him to free the Emperor, while the majority of Cao Cao's forces are at Chirbi. Having lost at Chirbi and losing the authority that came with being the Emperor's protector, Cao Cao's forces lose most of their strength, and instead looks to be Sun Quan who will conquer the land. If you're with Liu Bei, you'll defeat Cao Cao in Chirbi and retain control of Jing, marking a solid foothold for the land of virtue that he seeks to create. Lastly, Cao Cao's hypothetical ending has him win at Chirbi and sweep both Liu Bei and the Sun clan aside, gaining a solid foothold in Jing as both forces that made up the Coalition are forced to retreat, with Cao Cao's forces in hot pursuit. None of the hypothetical endings end with the war completely done and settled, though they do end with your chosen faction in a very powerful and dominant position. In general, I find the best faction to side with in the game to be Wei, Cao Cao's faction. Now, Wei has always been my favorite faction in this franchise, so I have some undeniable biases when I say that. But my words go beyond simple favoritism. Wei has the advantage that it has a wide variety of distinct officers, as well as a wide variety of unique-looking enemies. Shu also has a wide variety of enemies, but you spend most of the story with just the three sworn brothers. It isn't until Chapter 5 that we start getting a decently sized cast. And with Wu, while there is a nice amount of characters in your faction, your enemies are mostly just a bunch of generic officers, whose names won't mean much to you unless you're really keen on studying the time period this game is based on. It isn't until Wu's final two battles, both against Cao Cao's forces, that the drudgery of the generic officer fest comes to an end. Regardless of which faction you choose, and regardless of whether you got the normal ending or the hypothetical ending, the game ends with the Wanderer returning to the remains of his village, under the large tree, having a final conversation with Zhu He about how he's chosen his path, and has comrades to help him achieve a land of peace. As the story ends at Chirbi, the door is definitely open for a sequel, perhaps stretching as far as a battle such as Fawn Castle or the Wuzhong Plains. Dynasty Warriors, as of Dynasty Warriors 9, boasted an impressive 94 different playable and uniquely designed characters. Dynasty Warriors Origins removes nearly half of the cast, and the ones that remain are mostly unplayable. A large chunk of the missing characters can be credited to how early the story ends, but there's also quite a few pre-Chirby characters, like Cao Pi or Dong Bai, who are nowhere to be seen. A small handful of characters, usually the most important characters in the story, are sporting brand new designs. Compare Sun Quan of Dynasty Warriors 9 versus his appearance in Origins. But the vast majority of the characters in the game are recycling their Dynasty Warriors 9 design. Whether characters have a new design or recycle an old one, the characters are more or less the same characters they were back in Dynasty Warriors 9, with a couple of exceptions. In past entries, Dong Zhuo was a deranged hedonist, whose objective was to create a paradise of wealth, wine, and women for himself, and was violently intolerant of anything that took his attention away from his cravings. In Origins, he's now a more philosophical character, speaking of a worldview that likens humans to beasts who devour others to get what they want, and his primary motivation in the game is to prove the validity of this viewpoint. Ultimately, it's just some bells and whistles on the mindset that the strong get their way, and the weak can't do jack about it. His horniness for women is still present, it's just not half of his characterization anymore. And honestly, I think this is for the best, as Dong Zhuo was such an absurd caricature in older games that I found him kind of hard to take seriously. Origins Dong Zhuo I actually can see as a character that pretty much every other major warlord had to band together to take on. The other character who is very different from previous depictions of is Jinji. In past entries of the franchise, Jinji was the character archetype of the haughty rich girl. In Origins, she's much kinder, though also much gloomier. When first introduced, she describes herself as having been raised to be elegant and cultured so she can marry into a prestigious family, which she compares to being stuck in a bird cage, and while she has exquisite wings, she isn't allowed to flap them. And when she marries into the Yuan family, it will just be another cage. Though when the Yuan are defeated and she joins Cao faction, she says she's now free. She also makes lots of flower analogies in her dialogue. The way certain characters have their names pronounced is all over the place. I was just talking about Dong Zhuo, so let's just have a quick little demonstration of how his name gets pronounced throughout the game.
I have but one question. Are you loyal to the Han? Or to Dong Zhuo?
Actually, I'm a vassal of Lord Dong Zhuo.
Yes. Placing the Emperor under our control without good reason would make us no different than Dong Zhuo.
And he's far from the only example of this. Throughout Wu's story, I counted at least 5 different ways Sun Ce's name was pronounced. It's also inconsistent as to whether or not his faction's name is pronounced as Wu, or if it's pronounced as U. But the most glaring of all to me was a name that was consistently pronounced throughout the game. Lu Bu is no longer Lu Bu. He is now Louis Bu, which, try as I might, my ears can't get completely used to. Now, for all I know, Lu Bu was never correct, and Louis Bu is the correct pronunciation of his name, but it's still off for me. I think it's just a psychological thing. The Dynasty Warriors games love to tell you not to pursue Lu Bu. The word pursue and the name Lu Bu are both 2 syllables in length, which makes it oddly satisfying to say. But do not pursue Louis Bu doesn't sound as good. Still, for the sake of consistency with the game I'm reviewing, I'll call him Louis Bu for the remainder of this review. When interacting with the Wanderer, most characters are very positive about him. This goes into a bit of a grievance I have with these sort of avatar characters. They tend to be disproportionately liked by everybody around them. We even have Liu Bei decide to talk to the Wanderer about a certain matter rather than his sworn brothers. What few characters are wary of the Wanderer tend to be wary due to professional obligation, not because they actually dislike him. Shifting over to talking about gameplay, Dynasty Warriors Origins disregards the highly controversial new combat system of Dynasty Warriors 9, in favor of going back to the system that most Warriors games have. If you play Dynasty Warriors 8 or 7, you'll be right at home with the basic combat system. Normal attacks, which combo-ending strong attacks can be performed off of, Muso attacks, and Muso Rage mode. Note that unlike some recent games, there are no aerial Muso attacks in this game. In the game, there are 10 weapons you can equip. The first is the sword, which you start off with, then another 8 weapons which you will collect organically as you play through the game. The 10th and final weapon is the halberd, which can be acquired by optionally defeating Louis Bru at Hulao Gate, or just buying it from a shop after you beat the game. The game will even let you change weapons in the middle of a battle, so you're not stuck with a weapon that's ill-suited for the situation at hand. However, there are some situations where the game won't let you change weapon, such as when you're currently flinching from an enemy's attack. And this is more of a personal thing, but consider the Wanderer's design. He's wearing a mostly cloth outfit by default, and once joining a faction he wears light armor. He has a more tactician vibe to his appearance, and as such I feel he looks fairly ridiculous when equipped with heavier weapons like the twin pikes. You can see a number of hexagon-shaped symbols above the health meter. This is called bravery, and is used to perform battle arts. Battle arts are a combat feature that lets you perform special attacks that can be helpful to whittle down enemy mobs or officers. How much bravery is needed to perform battle arts depends on the attack in question. Some are as little as 1 unit of bravery, others require as many as 8 units of bravery. Be mindful of how much bravery you have, as not being able to do any battle arts can put you in a really bad position. There are multiple different battle arts that you can equip. Note that while some battle arts are universal, many are tied to specific weapon classes. Some can only be used with a sword and cannot be used with any other weapon. By extension, changing your weapon will also change your battle art loadout, so be prepared for that if you do a mid-battle weapon swap. Battle arts can also be mastered, requiring you to use the art in question multiple times, eventually mastering it, which increases its attack power. Note, however, that mastering does nothing for the bravery cost of a battle art. But, mercifully, battle arts that demand more bravery to use also ask for less usages to master them. Bear in mind you are not invincible when using battle arts. You will still take damage when using them. Pay attention, or you may lose lots of health without realizing it. While the Wanderer is the main character and central playable character, in many battles in the game you can take companions into battle with you. These companions will follow you around and fight alongside you. You can also play as them in a limited capacity, periodically being able to temporarily switch to playing as them, and after a certain amount of time they will simply do their ultimate Muso attack and you'll be switched back to playing as the Wanderer. You will spend about 99% of your time playing as the Wanderer because, as you can see, other characters can only be played for a short time. Speaking personally, the fact that you rarely play as someone besides the Wanderer went a long way to making the game feel very stale, when this is a franchise that traditionally boasts such an absurdly high amount of playable characters. In Chapter 2 of the game, during the Battle of Sushui Gates, you're given a squad of soldiers to command. During gameplay, these soldiers will follow you around bodyguard style, and you can command them to perform specific tasks, ranging from firing arrows, to charging on horseback, to guarding a designated spot. Perhaps more importantly, you need to have your squad with you to destroy siege weapons. You cannot attack and destroy catapults or ballistae yourself. You must order your soldiers to destroy them, at which point you'll see them chucking torches at it. The more soldiers you have, the faster they can fulfill this task. Your soldiers can also be attacked by the enemy and defeated. While you can notice their number going down, the game won't go out of its way to notify you of anything until you've lost each and every soldier, at which point you'll be alerted that your unit of guards has retreated. If you run out of soldiers, replenishing them is as simple as entering a base controlled by your army, at which point they'll slowly but surely reform. The common soldiers are mere fodder who are mostly just here to let you build Muso meter and bravery off of. But what will really put you at risk are enemy officers, enemies who use the same types of weapon you do. The developers have made enemy officers a lot more challenging than they used to be, such as how they don't flinch much from your attacks unless you start hitting them right after they completed an attack of their own. If multiple officers are together, they can also cover each other much more effectively than they did in previous games. They also sport special attacks which can only be countered with specific actions, and some that are just completely unblockable. You also occasionally get challenged to duels by enemy officers, typically by an officer with very inflated stats that would be quite a slog to defeat normally. Win the duel and you can instantly defeat the officer. Conversely, lose the duel and you'll be left at death's door, with the officer retaining their high stats from before the duel. Officers are now much more boss battle-ish. I'm left feeling that one of Koei Tecmo's primary objective with Dynasty Warriors Origins was shutting the mouths of the critics who say, "You just mash one button and win." Speaking of boss battles, there are two officers in particular that I should bring up: Zhang Jiao and Louis Bu. Both of these officers have much more grandiose attacks compared to other officers in the game. Zhang Jiao, leader of the Yellow Turbans, employs many exceptional magical attacks in his last stand at the end of Chapter 1, and is a fight on a much grander scale compared to anything you've seen in the game up until that point. Meanwhile, Louis Bu unleashes shockwaves, shoots out projectile waves, and crosses the battlefield almost instantly to grab you in a chokehold. It's almost like he's in the wrong game entirely and he was supposed to be in a Devil May Cry clone. If you wish to see the hypothetical endings for the factions, you will have to achieve special fate-altering objectives in certain battles. The requirement usually being finding and defeating a certain enemy officer, or fulfilling objectives at lightning speed, typically with the effect of saving a character from certain death. Note that the scene of the officer getting saved from death can be a bit trollish. For example, if you save Guo Jia at Mount Bai Long in the Wei story, you'll still get the scene where he seems to die and the scene fades to black, only to light back up as the Wanderer and the other Wei strategists appear to bring him somewhere warm before he dies in the cold. It's the same for the other averted fate scenes involving saving an officer who's supposed to die. You still get their death scene, only to then get a follow-up of them being saved from their demise. Possibly the biggest new battlefield feature in Origins, during certain battles you will come across what are known as large forces, a gigantic clump of soldiers and officers. There are two ways to deal with a large force. You can defeat the commander of the large force, which will make the force fall apart in an instant. But this is ill-advised as the commander is likely defended by multiple enemy officers. More often than not, you'll want to defeat a large force by cutting the body out from under the head. Each enemy you defeat within the large force whittles at its meter at the top of the screen. Even killing the minor enemy soldiers will damage it. But this is very minuscule. Generally what you want to do is to be defeating enemy officers, which will do hefty damage to the large force. And don't think you can just run in and try to one-man a large force. Enemies are much more aggressive if they're in a large force. There are a lot of officers in a large force that will mercilessly swarm you. And even the common soldiers are a lot more active without attacking. Charge in without a plan, and you may find yourself feeling sympathetic to the ball in a game of ping pong. Rather than just charge in solo, charge in with your allies. After certain mission objectives are met, your allies will park themselves not far from a large force, and will charge in once you join up with them. Not only will this give your faction a morale boost, it will also mean more allied officers fighting with you against the large force. Large forces will also do what are called grand tactics, where the force organizes to do a certain attack. You're given a time limit to stop the grand tactic by performing a certain task. Succeed and the attack will stop if your allies get a morale boost, or fail and the enemies will get a morale boost of their own. Grand tactics have a certain frustrating quirk to them, however. Whenever the enemy starts one up, the game has to slow to a crawl so we can dramatically focus on the officer who started it up for several seconds. This annoyance is magnified by the fact that a large force will typically do about 2 or 3 grand tactics. Anything that forces me out of the gameplay so abruptly like this has my ire. Your allies can do their own grand tactics, but the objective is always to defend a certain officer for 30 seconds. Succeed and get up beside the officer in question to see a host of allies do a combined attack to do some damage to the large force. If you can break a large force, you'll be in a good position to mop up what's left. Officers left behind will take a massive nerf to their stats that will let you kill them with minimal fuss. Minus the enemy commander, who will retain high stats. In between battles, you'll be traversing a map of China. This will be how you advance the story, meet new characters, and begin battles. You can also hear voice lines when you approach towns or camps. It's mostly irrelevant information, but you can hear the common people commenting on the state of things.
Even with such an eminent family, Yuan Shao stands out as truly powerful, trumping even Yuan Shu.
And at other times, it's just the writers trying to be funny.
If I hear one more yay out of the people of yay, I might just walk away.
I'm not particularly endeared by the map. There's no real sense of exploration here, and pretty much everything on the map could have been achieved with simple minions. Most Warriors games have something called free mode, which lets you replay battles at your leisure. Origins doesn't exactly have free mode. What it does have is that after you beat the game, you can freely replay battles as you see fit from the story menu. If you replay a battle that offers you a companion, you'll have more freedom as to which companion you can bring with you, but there are still some limitations. In my estimation, the game won't let you use a character as a companion if that character is an enemy officer in the same battle. This quasi-free mode is also the only way to have Louis Bu as a companion, the one secret companion of the game. Simply defeat him at Hulao Gate to unlock him for this mode. After being gone for close to 3 years after Dynasty Warriors 9 Empires, it was great to be playing a new Dynasty Warriors game again, even if it does have a number of odd gameplay quirks that annoyed me. Ultimately, I will give this game a score of 8 out of 10. The game boasts many new improvements with how the story is told and how the combat is handled, but the way the game can regularly, irksomely take you out of the gameplay to show you something, and the sudden drop of playable characters really gets on my nerves. Regardless, I'm hopeful for the future, either in Origins 2 or Dynasty Warriors 10. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.
choose